The silver towers of Zephyria Prime stretched toward 3 crimson suns, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the eternal twilight that bathed the planet. In the highest spire, Queen Valara stood before the vast window of her throne room, her 6 arms folded in contemplation. Her iridescent blue skin shimmered with patterns that betrayed her inner turmoil, though her expression remained as cold as the void between stars. Behind her, the Grand Council of Zephyria waited in tense silence. 12 beings of various alien species sat around a circular table made from compressed starlight, their eyes fixed on their ruler's back. The air hummed with nervous energy, punctuated only by the soft clicking of claws against metal and the whisper of breathing from species that required different atmospheric compositions. "Your Majesty," spoke Counselor Thrix, his serpentine head weaving slightly as he chose his words carefully. "The reports from the outer colonies grow more concerning each cycle. Love continues to spread among our people like a virus." Queen Valara's shoulder blades tightened, causing the bioluminescent markings along her spine to pulse a dangerous amber. Love. The word itself felt like poison on her tongue whenever she was forced to acknowledge its existence. For 300 cycles, she had ruled the Zephyrian Empire with logic, efficiency, and absolute control. Love was chaos. Love was weakness. Love was the enemy of order. She turned slowly, her 4 violet eyes scanning each council member with the intensity of a hunter evaluating prey. "Counselor Thrix speaks truth," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made her words impossible to ignore. "Love has indeed infected our people. It makes them irrational. It causes them to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. It weakens our empire." The council members exchanged glances. They had heard this speech before, but something in their queen's tone suggested this time would be different, more final. In the Kepler system, Commander Zix abandoned his post to rescue a lover trapped on a failing station. Valara continued, beginning to pace around the council table with predatory grace. 17 soldiers died because their leader chose personal attachment over duty. On Titan 7, an entire mining operation ground to a halt when workers refused orders that would separate mated pairs. Production fell by 43%. Counselor Yenta, a gaseous being contained within a translucent environmental suit, spoke through her voice modulator. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, we could find ways to work with these emotional attachments rather than against them." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Queen Valara's gaze fixed on Yenta. "Work with chaos? Accommodate weakness? Counselor Yenta, you disappoint me." She continued her circuit around the table, her footsteps silent despite her imposing height. "No, the time for half measures has passed. Love is a disease, and diseases must be eradicated completely." She returned to her position before the great window and raised one of her hands. The gesture activated holographic displays throughout the room, showing star maps, population centers, and military installations across the Zephyrian Empire. Thousands of worlds, billions of beings, all under her rule. "I hereby decree the absolute ban on love in all its forms throughout the Zephyrian Empire," she announced, her voice carrying such authority that several council members reflexively bowed their heads. Romantic attachment, mated pair bonds, parental devotion beyond basic care, all are now classified as crimes against the state. The penalty is exile to the Void Worlds. The Void Worlds. Even the council members who had served under Valara's iron rule for decades felt a chill at the mention of those barren, forgotten planets where political prisoners were sent to live out their remaining years in isolation. It was a fate many considered worse than death. Counselor Thrix raised his head cautiously. "Your Majesty, the logistics of enforcing such a decree across the entire empire will be handled by the Emotion Police," Valara interrupted. "I am authorizing the creation of a new branch of our security forces, trained specifically to detect and eliminate emotional attachments. They will have unlimited authority to investigate, arrest, and prosecute violators of the love ban." The Queen manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on various sectors of the Empire. Phase 1 begins immediately in the core worlds. Every citizen will undergo emotional evaluation. Those found guilty of harboring love will be given one chance to undergo neural adjustment, a procedure that will eliminate their capacity for such feelings. Those who refuse will be exiled. Counselor Morok, a crystalline being whose faceted body caught and refracted the room's lighting, spoke with the tinkling sound of wind chimes. Your Majesty, what of existing family units? Mated pairs who have served the Empire faithfully? Surely there must be some consideration. Consideration? Valara's voice carried harmonics that made the crystal beings in the room vibrate uncomfortably. Counselor Morok, you speak as if love deserves mercy, as if chaos deserves compromise. She gestured, and the display shifted to show productivity charts, crime statistics, and efficiency ratings from across the Empire. Observe the data. Every sector showing declining performance correlates directly with increased emotional attachment among the population. The evidence was undeniable, displayed in cold, precise numbers. Worlds where love flourished showed decreased military efficiency, reduced industrial output, and higher rates of civil disobedience. The statistics painted love not as a beautiful emotion, but as a quantifiable threat to imperial stability. The neural adjustment procedure will be offered first as a voluntary treatment, Valara continued, manipulating the display to show medical facilities being constructed across the core worlds. Citizens will have 30 cycles to report for evaluation. Those found to harbor love, but willing to undergo treatment, will have their emotional centers safely and permanently modified. They will retain all other feelings, joy, satisfaction, loyalty to the Empire, but romantic and familial love will be eliminated. Counselor Drex, whose multi-tentacled form had remained motionless throughout the discussion, finally stirred. And those who refuse both exile and treatment? Queen Valara's smile was as cold as deep space. There is no third option, Counselor Drex. The Empire has no place for those who choose chaos over order, emotion over logic, personal attachment over duty to the greater good. The council members absorbed this pronouncement in heavy silence. They had witnessed their queen's gradual hardening over the centuries, her increasing intolerance for what she viewed as weakness. But this decree went beyond anything they had imagined possible. The announcement will be broadcast across all Imperial communication networks within the hour, Valara declared. I want the message clear and unmistakable. Love is now illegal. Those who harbor it are enemies of the state. Those who act upon it are traitors to everything the Zephyrian Empire represents. As if summoned by her words, the chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. A procession of beings entered, their black uniforms marking them as members of the Imperial Guard, but with modifications none of the Council had seen before. Additional sensor arrays, emotional detection equipment, and neural scan devices mark them as the first members of the newly formed Emotion Police. Director Kane will oversee the Emotion Police, Valara announced as a tall, pale humanoid stepped forward from the group. His species was known for their complete lack of emotional expression, making them ideal for the role. He has been granted absolute authority to implement the love ban through whatever means necessary. Director Kane bowed precisely, his movements mechanical and efficient. Your Majesty, the first Emotion Police units are already being deployed to population centers throughout the core worlds. We estimate full implementation of Phase 1 within 60 cycles. Excellent. Valara turned back to the window, dismissing the council with a wave of one hand. You have your orders. The age of emotional weakness ends today. The Zephyrian Empire will be stronger, more efficient, and more unified than ever before. As the council members filed out in subdued silence, none dared voice the questions that haunted their thoughts. How could an empire survive without love? What would become of a civilization that outlawed the very emotion that drove creation, sacrifice, and growth? And perhaps most troubling of all, what had happened to their queen to make her hate love so completely? The answers to those questions lay buried in Valara's past. In memory she had sealed away so deeply that even she sometimes forgot they existed. But the universe has a way of bringing suppressed truths to the surface, often in the most unexpected forms. 3 sectors away from Zephyria Prime, a small diplomatic vessel bearing the insignia of the United Earth Federation was requesting permission to enter Zephyrian space. Its mission, to establish formal relations between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. Its crew consisted of career diplomats, xenobiologists, and cultural attaches, all carefully chosen for their expertise in first contact protocols. Among them was Dr. Marcus Chun, a xenopsychologist whose specialty was understanding the emotional and psychological patterns of alien species. He was young for such a crucial mission, but his work on emotional compatibility between species had earned him recognition throughout the Federation. More importantly, he possessed something that would prove more valuable than all his academic credentials combined, an utterly genuine capacity for love that no amount of scientific training could diminish. The irony was perfect and terrible. As Queen Valara's decree spread across her empire, banning love and condemning those who harbored it, the universe was already conspiring to place in her path the one being whose very nature would challenge everything she believed about love, logic, and the price of absolute power. The Earth vessel's request was approved through standard diplomatic channels. After all, the humans were a minor species from a distant galaxy, hardly worth the attention of the emotion police. What possible threat could they represent to the most powerful empire in known space? Director Kane reviewed the diplomatic request from his new headquarters on Zephyria Prime. The building had been requisitioned from the former Ministry of Cultural Affairs, an entire department that had been dissolved as part of the love ban, since culture invariably led to emotional expression and attachment. Now its halls echoed with the footsteps of emotion police officers and the hum of surveillance equipment. A minor diplomatic mission, Kane reported to Queen Valara during their evening briefing. Humans seeking trade agreements and cultural exchange. Standard procedures apply. See that they're monitored during their stay. Valara replied, without looking up from the reports flowing across her desk. Industrial output was already showing improvement in sectors where the love ban had been most vigorously enforced. We cannot allow alien emotional contamination to undermine our progress. Neither ruler nor enforcer could imagine that among the arriving humans was someone whose emotional authenticity was so profound, so naturally expressed, that it would prove impossible to ignore or classify as weakness. Someone whose very presence would force Queen Valara to confront the truth about her own past and the real reason behind her war against love. The diplomatic vessel entered Zephyrian space precisely on schedule, its crew unaware that they were flying into the heart of an empire that had just declared their most basic human emotion to be a capital crime. In the ship's research quarters, Dr. Marcus Chun studied his notes on Zephyrian culture, preparing for what he hoped would be a successful first contact mission. He had no way of knowing that success and failure would prove to be far more complicated than anyone could have imagined, or that the fate of love itself would soon rest in the hands of a queen who had forgotten how to feel and a human who felt too much. The diplomatic transport New Horizon docked at Zephyria Prime's orbital station with barely a tremor, its advanced stabilizers compensating perfectly for the gravitational pull of the massive space structure. Through the viewports, the human delegation could see the planet below, its surface a patchwork of silver cities and purple oceans beneath the light of 3 red suns. Dr. Marcus Chun stood at the observation deck, mesmerized by his first view of an alien world. At 34, he was the youngest member of the diplomatic team, but his expertise in xenopsychology had made him essential to the mission. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from the long journey, and his brown eyes held the kind of curiosity that made him excellent at his job and potentially dangerous in a place where emotion was now illegal. Beautiful, isn't it? Ambassador Sarah Williams joined him at the viewport. She was a career diplomat with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Hard to believe that just 3 days ago, they passed what our intelligence reports are calling the love ban. Marcus frowned, pulling up his data pad to review the intercepted communications. It's unprecedented. I've studied over 200 alien cultures, and none have ever attempted to legislate against emotional attachment on this scale. Queen Valara must believe love poses a genuine threat to her empire, or she's completely lost her mind, Ambassador Williams said dryly. Either way, it complicates our mission considerably. We're here to establish cultural exchange programs, and love is pretty much the foundation of human culture. The docking bay doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, and the delegation was greeted by a formal reception committee of Zephyrian officials. Marcus was immediately struck by how different they looked in person compared to the holographic briefings. The Zephyrians were tall and elegant, with iridescent blue skin that shifted colors subtly as they moved. Their 4 eyes were arranged symmetrically on their faces, and their 6 arms moved with liquid grace. But what struck Marcus most powerfully was the complete absence of emotional expression. The Zephyrian officials were polite, efficient, and utterly blank. They moved through the greeting protocols with mechanical precision, as if they were performing a program rather than genuinely welcoming guests. "Welcome to Zephyria Prime," spoke the lead official, whom Marcus's translator identified as Deputy Minister Kelleran. "I trust your journey was satisfactory. You will be escorted to your accommodation quarters immediately. Queen Valara has graciously agreed to receive your delegation tomorrow at the 14th hour." As they were led through the corridors of the orbital station, Marcus noticed something troubling. Everywhere he looked, he saw the same emotional emptiness. Workers moved through their tasks without speaking to each other. Families, if they could still be called that, stood in line for transport shuttles without any sign of affection or connection. Children stayed close to their guardians, but showed no warmth, no playfulness, no joy. "It's like they've been drained," he whispered to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the mission's xenobiologist. "The love ban has only been in effect for 3 days, but look at them. They're acting like emotions never existed." Elena nodded grimly. The intelligence reports mentioned something called neural adjustment. Maybe more people underwent the procedure voluntarily than we thought. Their shuttle descended through Zephyria Prime's atmosphere, providing a closer view of the planet's surface. The cities were undeniably beautiful, graceful spires connected by bridges that seemed to float without support, gardens that spiraled up the sides of buildings in perfect geometric patterns, transportation networks that flowed with mathematical precision. But there was something sterile about it all, as if the entire civilization had been designed by architects who had never experienced joy. The guest quarters were luxurious by any standard, with accommodations carefully designed for human physiology. Marcus found himself in a suite with walls that displayed slowly shifting patterns of light, furniture that adjusted automatically to his comfort, and a view of the capital city that stretched to the horizon. But despite the obvious effort that had gone into making the space welcoming, it felt cold and artificial. That evening, as Marcus reviewed his notes on Zephyrian psychology, an alert chimed from his suite's communication system. A message from Queen Valara herself, requesting a private audience with him before the formal diplomatic meeting. The request was unusual. Protocol normally required all meetings to include the full delegation, but Marcus's training had taught him to recognize opportunities for breakthrough moments in first contact situations. The next morning, Marcus was escorted to the royal palace by a security detail that he realized, with growing unease, belonged to the newly formed Emotion Police. Their black uniforms were equipped with sensor arrays that he suspected were designed to detect emotional responses. As they walked through the palace corridors, Marcus forced himself to maintain the calm, professional demeanor that had served him well in previous diplomatic missions. The throne room was vast and intimidating, with walls that rose toward a ceiling lost in shadows. At the far end, Queen Valara sat on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. She was beautiful in an alien way that Marcus's human mind struggled to categorize. Tall and elegant, with skin that shifted through shades of blue and violet, for eyes that seemed to see everything, and in presence that commanded absolute attention. But what struck Marcus most was the profound sadness he sensed beneath her carefully controlled exterior. His xenopsychological training had taught him to read emotional patterns across species barriers, and despite the Zephyrian Queen's impressive self-control, he could detect something broken at her core. Dr. Marcus Chun. Queen Valara spoke, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that made every word feel significant. Your reputation precedes you, a specialist in understanding the emotional patterns of alien species. How fascinating that the humans would send such a person at this particular time. Marcus bowed, according to the protocol briefings he had memorized. Your Majesty, I'm honored by your invitation. The United Earth Federation hopes to establish lasting friendship between our peoples. Friendship. Valara repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. An interesting choice of words, Dr. Chun. Tell me, in your professional opinion, what is the difference between friendship and love? The question was clearly a trap, but Marcus had spent years learning to navigate sensitive topics with alien cultures. Friendship is based on mutual respect, shared experiences, and compatible goals. Love involves a deeper emotional connection that includes vulnerability, sacrifice, and the desire to prioritize another's well-being above one's own. And you consider this love to be valuable? Marcus paused, recognizing that his answer could determine the fate of the entire diplomatic mission. But his training had also taught him that authenticity was often the key to breakthrough moments with alien psychology. Your Majesty, love is perhaps the most powerful force in human civilization. It drives us to create art, to explore dangerous unknowns, to sacrifice for future generations. Every great achievement in human history has been motivated, directly or indirectly, by love for someone or something. Queen Valara rose from her throne and began walking down the steps toward him. Marcus noticed that her bioluminescent markings were shifting in patterns he couldn't interpret, but his xenopsychological training suggested strong internal conflict. And yet, she said, love also drives humans to make irrational decisions, does it not? To abandon duty for personal attachment? To choose the welfare of one individual over the good of many? Sometimes, Marcus admitted, but in my experience, the benefits far outweigh the costs. Love makes us stronger, more creative, more willing to endure hardship for meaningful goals. Valara had reached the bottom of the steps now and was circling him slowly, studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining a fascinating specimen. You speak of love as if you understand it personally, Dr. Chun. Do you? The question was deeply personal, but Marcus sensed that his answer would be crucial. Yes, Your Majesty. I've experienced love in many forms, for family, for friends, for partners, for my work, for the wonder of discovery itself. And has this love made you weak? Has it caused you to make poor decisions? Marcus considered carefully. Love has caused me to take risks I might not have taken otherwise. But those risks led to growth, to deeper understanding, to moments of joy that made life worth living. If that's weakness, then I'm grateful for it. Something shifted in Queen Valara's expression, a flicker of something that might have been recognition or pain. For just a moment, the perfect control slipped, and Marcus glimpsed the wounded being beneath the imperial facade. Interesting, she said, her voice carefully neutral once again. I wonder, Dr. Chun, what you would say if I told you that love had cost me everything I valued, that it led me to make choices that resulted in the deaths of those I cared about most. The question was clearly personal, revealing far more about the Queen's motivations than any intelligence briefing could have provided. Marcus chose his words carefully. I would say that love sometimes involves tragedy, Your Majesty. But even tragic love teaches us about the value of what we've lost and the importance of protecting what remains. Violara stopped circling and stood directly in front of him, her four violet eyes studying his face with uncomfortable intensity. You truly believe this, Edo? Despite knowing that your belief in love's value puts you in violation of imperial law, that I could have you arrested and exiled for harboring such emotions. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but he maintained eye contact. Your Majesty, I can't change what I am or what I believe, even to avoid punishment. That would betray everything that makes me human. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Marcus could sense massive internal struggle in the alien queen, as if his words had triggered some kind of emotional earthquake beneath her carefully constructed defenses. Finally, she spoke. You will attend the formal diplomatic meeting tomorrow as planned. But I want you to understand something, Dr. Chun. Your presence here complicates matters in ways you cannot imagine. She turned and walked back toward her throne, but paused halfway up the steps. Tell me, in your professional opinion, is it possible for someone to suppress love so completely that they forget what it felt like? The question was clearly personal, and Marcus answered as gently as he could. Suppression is possible, Your Majesty. But in my experience, love doesn't disappear, it just hides, waiting for the right conditions to resurface. Valara's bioluminescent markings pulsed once, briefly, in a pattern that Marcus's training told him indicated deep emotional response. Then, she regained control and returned to her throne. You may go, Dr. Chun, but I suggest you be very careful during your stay on Zephyria Prime. The emotion police are quite efficient at detecting what they have been trained to find. As Marcus was escorted from the throne room, his mind raced with questions. Why had Queen Valara requested this private meeting? What had happened in her past to make her hate love so completely? And why did he have the growing sense that her war against love was really a war against her own suppressed emotions? That night, as he reviewed his notes from the meeting, Marcus realized that the diplomatic mission had already succeeded in ways the Earth Federation could never have anticipated. He had glimpsed the heart of an alien queen and recognized the universal pattern of emotional pain that transcended species barriers. But he had also realized that helping Queen Valara rediscover love might be the most dangerous mission of his career. Outside his window, the lights of Zephyria Prime sparkled like stars, beautiful and cold. Somewhere in the royal palace, an alien queen was struggling with emotions she had spent centuries trying to forget. And in the growing network of emotion police stations throughout the city, plans were being made to eliminate love from the most powerful empire in known space. Marcus Chun had come to Zephyria Prime to establish diplomatic relations. Instead, he had found himself at the center of a conflict between love and law, emotion and empire, the heart and the crown. The question was whether one human's capacity for love could overcome 300 years of imperial conditioning, and whether he would survive long enough to find out. The formal diplomatic meeting was held in the Empire's Grand Council Chamber, a crystalline dome that offered a panoramic view of Zephyria Prime's 3 suns. As the human delegation took their seats around a massive circular table, Marcus noticed that Queen Valara seemed different from their private encounter the day before. Her emotional shields were firmly in place, her expression perfectly controlled, but he caught subtle changes in her bioluminescent patterns that suggested internal tension. Director Kane sat at the Queen's right hand, his pale features as expressionless as carved marble. The emotion police chief had clearly been briefed about the human delegation, and his sensor-enhanced uniform was undoubtedly monitoring every emotional response in the room. Marcus forced himself to maintain professional calm, knowing that any sign of the growing attraction he felt toward the alien queen would result in immediate arrest. Ambassador Williams began with standard diplomatic protocols, presenting gifts from Earth and outlining potential trade agreements. But Marcus could see that Queen Valara's attention kept drifting to him, her 4 violet eyes studying him with the same intensity she had shown during their private meeting. Your Majesty, Ambassador Williams was saying, The United Earth Federation is particularly interested in cultural exchange programs. We believe that sharing art, music, and literature between our peoples could foster deep understanding and lasting friendship. Cultural exchange. Director Kane interjected before the Queen could respond. You speak of sharing emotional expressions between species. Such contamination would violate imperial law under the love ban. Art and music exist to evoke feeling, often leading to the kind of emotional attachments we have outlawed. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the mission's xenobiologist, looked puzzled. But surely scientific collaboration would be acceptable? The advancement of knowledge benefits everyone. Science based on logic and empirical evidence is permitted. Queen Valara spoke for the first time since the meeting began. However, human science appears to be significantly influenced by what you call passion for discovery and emotional attachment that clouds objective judgment. Marcus recognized his cue to contribute to the discussion. Your Majesty, in human experience, passion enhances scientific achievement rather than hindering it. Our greatest discoveries have been made by scientists who love their work so deeply they were willing to sacrifice everything for it. The room fell silent. Several council members exchanged alarmed glances, and Director Kane's hand moved toward a device on his belt that Marcus assumed was some kind of arrest mechanism. But Queen Valara held up one of her hands, stopping him. Dr. Chen speaks from a species perspective, she said carefully. However, the Zephyrian Empire has achieved remarkable scientific advancement through purely logical approaches. Emotion is unnecessary for progress. Perhaps, Marcus said, knowing he was taking an enormous risk, but sensing that this might be his only chance to reach her. But what about the motivation to pursue progress in the first place? What drives a scientist to spend years studying the stars, if not love for the beauty and mystery of the universe? Queen Valara's bioluminescent markings shifted subtly, a pattern Marcus was beginning to associate with suppressed emotional response. Duty drives scientific pursuit, the obligation to serve one's empire and improve conditions for one's people. But what if duty and love pointed in the same direction? Marcus pressed gently. What if loving something made you more dedicated to protecting and improving it? Director Kane stood abruptly, his pale features showing the first expression Marcus had seen from him, cold anger. Your Majesty, this discussion has moved beyond acceptable parameters. Dr. Chun is actively promoting illegal emotional concepts. For a moment, the tension in the room was so thick it seemed solid. Marcus could see Queen Valara struggling with herself, her careful control warring against something deeper and more turbulent. Finally, she spoke. Director Kane is correct. This line of discussion ends now. She stood, her impressive height making her tower over the seated delegates. The diplomatic session will continue tomorrow. Dr. Chen will remain as my guest for further scientific consultation. The dismissal was clearly final, but as the human delegation filed out, Marcus caught Queen Valara's eye. The look she gave him was complex, warning, curiosity, and something that might have been desperate hope. That evening, Marcus was escorted to a different part of the palace, away from the diplomatic quarters. His new accommodation was smaller, but more personal, decorated with what appeared to be genuine Zephyrian art rather than the sterile efficiency of the guest suites. As he examined the intricate wall carvings, he realized they depicted scenes of emotional connection, Zephyrians embracing, celebrating, showing affection. Curious, isn't it? Queen Valara's voice came from behind him. She had entered silently, without guards or ceremony. In a more intimate setting, she seemed less imposing and more vulnerable. These carvings date from before my reign, before the Empire understood that emotion leads to chaos. Marcus turned to face her. They're beautiful. Whoever created them understood something profound about your people. My grandmother created them, Valara said quietly, moving closer to examine the artwork. Queen Lyanna was considered one of the greatest rulers in Zephyrian history. She believed that love made the Empire stronger. What changed your mind about that? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus could see Queen Valara wrestling with herself, and for the first time since arriving on Zephyria Prime, he glimpsed the wounded being beneath the Imperial facade. 300 years ago, she said finally, I was not always queen. I was third in line to the throne, free to pursue my own interests. I fell in love with someone I should not have loved. Marcus waited patiently, recognizing that this was the breakthrough moment his xenopsychological training had taught him to identify and nurture. His name was Kethrin. He was a scientist from a minor noble family, brilliant and passionate about his research into temporal mechanics. We worked together on a project to develop faster-than-light communication. Valara's bioluminescent markings began shifting in patterns that Marcus's growing familiarity with her told him indicated deep pain. I loved him completely. I trusted him with everything: Imperial secrets, military codes, the location of our most sensitive research facilities. What happened? He was a spy. The words came out flat and empty. An agent of the hegemony, our greatest enemy. For 5 years, he fed information to them, while I believed myself the luckiest being in the galaxy. When the betrayal was discovered, the war that followed cost us 3 billion lives. Marcus felt his heart ache for her pain. I am sorry. That kind of betrayal changed everything, Valara finished. My sister and brother died in the war. I inherited a throne I had never expected to hold, and an empire devastated by my emotional weakness. I vowed that love would never again be allowed to compromise Zephyrian security. But you can't have been the only one who ever loved and lost, Marcus said gently. Why punish your entire empire for one person's betrayal? Queen Valara moved to the window, gazing out at her capital city. Because love makes people vulnerable, Dr. Chun. It makes them do irrational things, trust the wrong people, prioritize individual happiness over collective good. The evidence is overwhelming. Marcus joined her at the window. In human history, love has also inspired people to extraordinary acts of courage and sacrifice. Our greatest heroes were motivated by love, for family, for home, for principles worth dying for. And how many died because of those heroes' emotional choices? Some, Marcus admitted, but how many more lived because of them? How many civilizations were saved, discoveries made, works of art created that enriched life for everyone? They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking out at the beautiful, sterile city below. Finally, Valara spoke again. You confuse me, Dr. Chun. Your presence here challenges everything I have built over 3 centuries of rule. Why do you persist in defending something you know could lead to your arrest? Marcus turned to look at her profile, struck again by her alien beauty and the profound sadness he sensed beneath her controlled exterior. Because I think you're wrong about love being weakness. And because what? The moment stretched between them, fraught with possibility and danger. Marcus knew that his next words could change everything. For himself, for the diplomatic mission, for the future of love in the Zephyrian Empire. Because I think you're still capable of love, despite everything you've done to convince yourself otherwise. Valara turned to face him fully, her 4 eyes wide with something that might have been shock or recognition. That's impossible. I underwent neural adjustment myself, the very first procedure. My capacity for love was eliminated completely. Was it? Marcus asked softly. Then, why did you request a private meeting with me? Why are you here now, sharing your most painful memories with a stranger? Why do your bioluminescent patterns change in ways that suggest deep emotional response every time we discuss love? For a long moment, they stared at each other across species barriers and centuries of pain. Marcus could see Queen Valara's carefully constructed worldview beginning to crack, her absolute certainty about love and logic wavering in the face of what she was feeling. This is dangerous, she whispered. Director Kane monitors everything. If he detected what you're suggesting, then we'll be careful, Marcus said, stepping closer to her. But I won't pretend not to feel what I'm feeling. And what are you feeling, Dr. Chun? The question was barely audible, spoken with the vulnerability of someone who had forgotten what it meant to hope for connection. I'm falling in love with you, Marcus said simply. With your intelligence, your strength, your dedication to your people, and the pain you carry that you think no one else can see. The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge over an abyss. Queen Valara's bioluminescent markings exploded into patterns of color that Marcus had never seen before. Complex, beautiful, and utterly alive. That's impossible, she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. You're human. I am Zephidian. Love between species has happened before, Marcus finished. I've studied enough alien cultures to know that emotional connection transcends biological boundaries. But the empire, the law, everything I've built, doesn't have to disappear, Marcus said gently. Love doesn't destroy order. It transforms it into something better. Queen Valara reached toward him with one of her hands, stopping just short of touching his face. If this is real, if what I'm feeling is love returning, then everything I've done, everyone I've hurt, can be forgiven and healed, Marcus said, covering her hand with his. The touch sent electricity through both of them. Alien nervous systems responding to connection in ways that transcended species differences. The neural adjustment, Valara whispered in wonder. It didn't work completely. I can feel something awakening that I thought was gone forever. Their moment of connection was shattered by the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside. Queen Valara jerked her hand back and resumed her imperial composure just as the chamber door opened to reveal Director Kane with a full squad of emotion police. Your Majesty, Kane said, his eyes moving between the Queen and Marcus with suspicious intensity. My sensors detected anomalous emotional readings from this location. I came to ensure your safety. Your concern is noted, Director, Valara replied, her voice once again carrying absolute authority. Dr. Chun and I were discussing the philosophical implications of emotion in scientific research. Nothing more. Kane's pale eyes studied them both carefully. Of course, Your Majesty. However, I recommend increased security monitoring for future meetings with the human delegation. Their emotional contamination appears to be more significant than initially assessed. As the emotion police filed out, Marcus and Queen Valara maintained careful distance between them. But the damage was done, or perhaps the healing had begun. Both of them now knew that love was not dead in the Zephyrian Empire. It was awakening in the heart of their ruler, and its emergence would shake the foundations of everything they had built on its absence. The crisis began 3 days after Director Kane's suspicious visit to Queen Valara's private chambers. Reports flooded in from across the Zephyrian Empire of citizens refusing to undergo neural adjustment, of families hiding rather than submitting to emotion police evaluation, of entire colonies declaring independence rather than surrendering their capacity for love. Marcus stood in the palace's communication center, watching holographic displays show the growing rebellion with a mixture of hope and dread. The human diplomatic team had been confined to the palace for their own safety, but everyone understood they were essentially prisoners. Ambassador Williams paced nervously near the viewport, while Dr. Rodriguez monitored communications channels for any word from Earth. Sector 7 is now completely dark, reported Captain Zex, one of Director Kane's senior officers. The entire population of Kepler 9 has gone underground. We're detecting massive energy signatures consistent with shield generators protecting hidden settlements. Director Kane studied the tactical displays with his characteristic emotionless expression. Deploy the 3rd Fleet to Sector 7. Anyone providing aid to emotional criminals will be considered an accomplice. Sir, another officer interjected hesitantly. The 3rd Fleet is reporting complications. Several ships have requested reassignment rather than attack civilian populations. Some crews are asking why they're being ordered to destroy families. The communication center fell silent except for the hum of machinery. For the first time since the love ban had been implemented, The emotion police were encountering resistance from their own forces. The logical foundation of the empire was beginning to crack under the pressure of suppressed humanity. Queen Valara entered the chamber with her usual silent grace, but Marcus could see the strain in her bioluminescent patterns. The awakening of her own emotions had made her acutely aware of the pain her laws were causing throughout the empire, and the internal conflict was becoming impossible to hide. "Report," she commanded, though her voice lacked its usual absolute authority. Director Kane gestured to the holographic displays. "The rebellion is spreading faster than our initial projections suggested, Your Majesty. It appears that the neural adjustment procedure was less effective than anticipated. Many citizens retained residual emotional capacity that has been reactivated by the crisis." "Reactivated by what?" Marcus asked, speaking without permission. Every head in the room turned toward him, but he pressed on. "You're talking about love as if it's a dormant virus. What if it's actually part of what makes your people strong?" "Dr. Chun," Director Kane said coldly, "you are here as a diplomatic guest, not as an advisor on imperial policy." "Perhaps he should be," Queen Valara said quietly, causing shocked silence throughout the chamber. "Dr. Chun, you study xenopsychology. In your professional opinion, what is causing this widespread resistance to the love ban?" Marcus chose his words carefully, knowing that everything he said was being recorded and analyzed. "Your Majesty, love isn't just an emotion, it's a survival mechanism. Beings who care for each other create stronger communities, more resilient societies, more innovative solutions to problems. When you try to remove it completely, you undermine the very foundations that make civilization possible." "Unsubstantiated theories," Director Kane snapped. "The data clearly shows that love leads to inefficiency, irrationality, and social disorder." "Does it?" Marcus gestured toward the tactical displays. "Because what I'm seeing here is an empire falling apart precisely because you removed love. Your people aren't rebelling against order. They're rebelling against emptiness." Captain Zex looked up from his monitoring station with obvious confusion. "Director, we're receiving a transmission from the rebel colonies. They're offering to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Director Kane's pale features showed the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him: shock. "They're criminals violating imperial law. There could be no negotiation." "Actually," Queen Valara said slowly, "perhaps there can be." The room erupted in whispered conversations as the implications of the Queen's statement sank in. Director Kane stepped forward, his voice urgent. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot be considering legitimizing this rebellion. The love ban is the foundation of your imperial reform. To reverse it now would be to admit error." "Or to admit growth," Valara replied. She moved to the central command station, her 6 hands dancing across the controls with practiced efficiency. "Patch me through to the rebel colonies. I will speak with them directly." "Your Majesty," Kane protested, "the security risk will be managed." Valara cut him off. "Captain Zex, open the channel." The holographic displays shifted to show a communication link being established across multiple star systems. After a moment, figures began appearing in projection, representatives from dozens of worlds, many of them showing signs of emotion that would have been illegal just days before. Marcus could see tears, determination, hope, and love clearly visible on alien faces that had been trained to show nothing. "I am Queen Valara of the Zephyrian Empire," she announced, her voice carrying across space to reach her rebellious subjects. "I understand you wish to discuss the love ban." An elderly Zephyrian female stepped forward as the apparent spokesperson for the rebels. "Your Majesty, I am Elder Thyra from the Kepler 9 colony. We do not wish to rebel against your rule, but we cannot surrender what makes us who we are." "And what is that, Elder Thyra?" "Our capacity to love our children, to care for our partners, to feel joy in creation and sorrow in loss. You call these things weakness, but they're what give life meaning." Marcus watched Queen Valara's face as she listened to her people's words. He could see her carefully constructed worldview continuing to crack, her absolute certainty about love being weakness challenged by the obvious strength and courage of those who had risked everything to preserve their emotions. Elder Thyra, Valara said slowly, if love gives life meaning, then what am I to make of the fact that love once cost the Empire 3 billion lives? The question was clearly personal, spoken from the heart of her ancient pain. Elder Thyra's expression softened with understanding. Your Majesty, we know the history of your ascension to the throne. We know about Kethrin's betrayal and the war that followed. But, with respect, the problem was not love itself. It was trusting the wrong person. How can one distinguish between love and deception? Marcus stepped forward, knowing that this might be his only chance to help both the Queen and her empire. Your Majesty, may I answer that? Valara nodded, her 4 eyes fixed on his face with desperate hope. Love reveals itself through actions over time, Marcus said, addressing both the Queen and the holographic assembly of rebels. Real love seeks the beloved's happiness even at personal cost. It inspires growth, sacrifice, and truth. Kethrin's betrayal wasn't love. It was manipulation disguised as love. And how do we know the difference? Elder Thyra asked. By learning to trust wisely rather than not at all, Marcus replied. Love requires vulnerability, yes. But the alternative, a world without love, is not strength. It's death of the spirit. Director Kane had heard enough. Your Majesty, this discussion has moved far beyond acceptable parameters. I must insist that you end this communication and authorize immediate military action against the rebel colonies. Queen Valara turned to face her emotion police director, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made his heart race with hope. The mask of absolute control was gone, replaced by the face of a being who had rediscovered her capacity to feel. Director Kane, she said softly, I hereby rescind the love ban. The words fell into absolute silence. For a moment, no one in the communication center seemed to breathe. Then, the chamber erupted in chaos. Your Majesty, Director Kane shouted, his pale features flushed with anger. You cannot simply reverse 300 years of imperial policy. The Empire will fall into chaos. The Empire is already falling into chaos, Valara replied calmly. But not because of love, because of its absence. She turned back to the holographic assembly of rebel representatives. Elder Thyra, I formally acknowledge that the love ban was an error. Love will once again be legal throughout the Zephyrian Empire. The reaction from the rebel colonies was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers, tears, and expressions of joy filled the communication channels as beings across the galaxy realized they could love openly once more. But the reaction in the Palace Communication Center was very different. Security alert. Director Kane spoke into his communication device. The Queen has suffered some form of mental breakdown. Initiate emergency protocols. The chamber doors burst open as armed emotion police flooded in, their weapons trained on Queen Valara. Marcus moved instinctively to place himself between the soldiers and the Queen, his human reflexes responding faster than his rational mind. Stand down, Valara commanded, but for the first time in centuries, her authority was being challenged by her own forces. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, Director Kane said, though his voice carried no trace of actual regret. But you're clearly suffering from emotional contamination. The neural adjustment procedure must have failed completely. You will undergo immediate retreatment. You cannot force medical procedures on the ruler of the Empire. I can and will, under emergency powers granted by the love ban itself. The Empire must be protected from emotional chaos, even if the source is the throne itself. Marcus stepped forward, his mind racing through possibilities. Director Kane, before you take action against Queen Valara, shouldn't you consider what will happen to the Empire if you remove its legitimate ruler? A Regency Council will be established until Her Majesty's emotional stability is restored. A Regency Council loyal to you, Marcus said. That's not restoration of order. That's the coup. Dr. Chun speaks truth, Captain Zex said unexpectedly from his monitoring station. Director, our communications with the fleet suggest widespread support for the Queen's decision. If we act against her, we risk civil war. Director Kane's expression remained coldly determined. Then, we will fight that war to preserve logic over chaos, order over emotion. And how many will die in that war? Queen Valara asked. How many of my people will suffer because you cannot accept that love might be strength rather than weakness? The standoff stretched taut as bowstring. Marcus could see that Director Kane was calculating odds, weighing the cost of action against inaction. The emotion police stood ready to arrest their own queen, while the communication channels still carried the voices of celebration from across the Empire. Director, Elder Thyra's voice came through the communication link. You are surrounded by beings who have chosen love over fear. Look around you. See the strength that comes from caring about something greater than yourself. As if her words had triggered some kind of awakening, Marcus began to notice something remarkable. The emotion police soldiers were looking at each other with recognition, their emotionless facades beginning to crack. Captain Zex straightened at his station, his shoulders squaring with newfound resolve. Even the palace staff who had been quietly performing their duties were standing taller, their suppressed emotions beginning to resurface. The neural adjustment never completely eliminated love, Queen Valara said softly. It only suppressed it, and now that suppression is breaking down throughout the Empire. Then, the procedure will be refined and re-administered, Director Kane insisted. But his voice carried less certainty than before. To every citizen, to every soldier, to every person in the galaxy who has rediscovered what it means to care about someone else. Marcus shook his head. You can't fight love itself, Director. It's like trying to fight gravity or time. It's a fundamental force of nature. The moment of decision arrived when one of the emotion police soldiers, a young Zephyrian female, lowered her weapon and removed her helmet. Her face showed tears, the first expression of genuine emotion Marcus had seen from any of Kane's forces. I remember my daughter, she whispered. Before the procedure, I remember how much I loved her. The effect was contagious. One by one, the other soldiers began lowering their weapons, their faces showing the awakening of suppressed emotions. Director Kane looked around wildly as his absolute authority crumbled in real time. This is temporary madness, he insisted. Emotional contamination that can be treated and cured. Or, Queen Valara said, stepping toward him with compassion rather than anger, it's the return of what makes us truly alive. She reached out with one of her hands and touched Director Kane's face gently. For a moment, his pale features showed something that might have been confusion or pain. You underwent the procedure yourself, didn't you? She asked softly. Complete emotional elimination. When was the last time you felt joy, Kane? When was the last time you looked forward to something, or felt proud of your accomplishments, or experienced the simple pleasure of a beautiful sunset? Director Kane's composure finally cracked. Those feelings, they make you weak. They make you vulnerable. They make you make mistakes. They make you alive, Marcus said. And sometimes alive beings do make mistakes. But they also create, discover, sacrifice for others, and find meaning in existence. The transformation was remarkable to witness. As Director Kane's emotional suppression broke down, his face became more human, more alien, but paradoxically more relatable. Marcus could see fear there, and confusion, but also the first stirrings of something that might have been wonder. Your Majesty. Elder Thyra's voice came from the communication link. The colonies are reporting that the neural adjustment effects are reversing throughout the Empire. It appears that your decision to rescind the love ban has triggered some kind of psychological cascade effect. Queen Valara moved to the communication station, her bioluminescent patterns now showing colors and patterns Marcus had never seen before. Complex, beautiful, and vibrantly alive. People of the Zephyrian Empire, she announced, her voice carrying to every world in their vast domain. I formally declare the end of the love ban and all associated policies. Love is not only legal, it is celebrated. The neural adjustment facilities will be converted to counseling centers to help those who wish to rediscover their emotional capacity. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From across the galaxy, voices joined in celebration. Tears of joy were shed, and families separated by the love ban began to reunite. Marcus watched the displays, showing spontaneous festivals erupting on world after world as the Empire rediscovered what it meant to feel. There will be challenges, Varlara continued, her gaze finding Marcus across the communication center. Love does involve risk, vulnerability, and the possibility of pain. But it also brings joy, creativity, and the strength that comes from caring about something greater than yourself. She paused, and Marcus saw her making a decision that would change not only the Empire but her own life forever. I have an announcement to make regarding my own status, she said, her voice carrying across the galaxy. I have discovered that love transcends species barriers, and I have fallen in love with Dr. Marcus Chun, the human xenopsychologist whose wisdom helped me remember what I had lost. The revelation sent shockwaves through the communication network. Marcus felt his heart race as he realized that Queen Varlara was publicly declaring her feelings, risking everything for love, just as her people had done. Furthermore, she continued, I'm formally requesting that Dr. Chun consider remaining on Zephyria Prime as my consort and advisor. The Zephyria Empire has much to learn about integrating emotion and logic, love, and leadership. Marcus stepped forward, his decision already made. Your Majesty, I would be honored to accept. As they stood together before the assembled representatives of an entire galaxy, Marcus realized that love had indeed conquered an empire. Not through war or conquest, but through the simple, powerful act of one being choosing to feel again. The Zephyrian Empire would never be the same, but it would be stronger, more creative, and more alive than it had ever been. Director Kane, his own emotions returning gradually, looked around the chamber with something approaching wonder. Your Majesty, he said slowly, what are my orders regarding the emotion police? Queen Varlara smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. Retrain them as counselors and social workers. Help the Empire rediscover love rather than suppressing it. As celebrations erupted across the galaxy, and the rigid order of 3 centuries gave way to the chaotic beauty of emotional awakening, Marcus took Queen Varlara's hand and felt the electric connection that transcended species barriers. Love had not destroyed the Zephyrian Empire, it had saved it. And in the years that followed, as the Empire integrated emotion and logic under their joint leadership, the galaxy would discover that love truly was the most powerful force in the universe. Not because it eliminated conflict, but because it gave beings something worth fighting for.